A homeless man is sitting quietly on a train when a group of rowdy young men, clearly looking for trouble, enters the carriage. They push past two other passengers, trying to provoke them. One of the passengers pulls out a gun, but the leader of the group, Anton, isn't intimidated. Instead, he and his gang scare the others, who eventually back down and leave. Anton casually tells his crew that they're going to be moving some weapons soon. Then Anton notices the homeless man sitting by himself and sees an opportunity to mess with someone new. He tries to steal the man's alcohol, but the homeless man quickly grabs his hand, holding it tight. This isn't just any homeless man. His name is John Reese, and he's a former special agent who's seen his share of action. Anton tries to pull away, but John's grip is unrelenting. Eventually, John lets him go, but Anton isn't satisfied and starts mocking John for not bringing enough booze for everyone. Anton and his crew have no idea who they're dealing with. They surround John, thinking they'll scare him, but he reacts in a flash. He takes down each one of them, disarming them with swift moves, breaking hands, kneeing them in sensitive spots, and delivering blows to their throats that leave them gasping for air. In the end, all 5 troublemakers are arrested and taken to the police station. At the station, Officer Carter reviews the security footage and walks into the room where John is being held. She jokes that he should have hit those guys harder, trying to break the ice with some small talk, but John stays silent. Carter then decides to take another approach. She gives John a cup of water, carefully handling it in an odd way, touching it on the inside instead of holding it normally. After she leaves the room, she hands the cup to a forensic technician who scans it for fingerprints. The prints are run through the police database, and soon they uncover John's true identity. His fingerprints link him to multiple crime scenes, and there are 4 active arrest warrants for him in different countries. Clearly, John has a complicated past. Carter is curious to know more, but before she gets the chance, a mysterious lawyer shows up and secures John's release. The lawyer brings John to his employer, a wealthy man named Harold Finch. Harold seems to know all about John's life and past struggles, including the fact that John has been trying to drink himself to death. Harold tells John that what he really needs is a purpose. Harold offers him a job, showing him the bustling streets of New York City and explaining that someone dies in the city every 18 hours. But what if they could stop it? Harold reveals that he has a list of people who are likely to be involved in crimes either as victims or perpetrators. The challenge is, Harold can't tell which one they'll be. He asks John to follow a woman named Hanson and figure out whether she's going to be in danger or cause it. However, John is skeptical and believes Harold is just some rich guy spying on his ex-girlfriend. John brushes him off and walks away. Later, John spends time in a hotel, shaving to change his appearance. That night, Harold plays a recording of a murder that happened 3 years ago in the room next to John's. Harold makes a dark joke about John being too late, just like he was too late for someone named Jessica. It becomes clear that Jessica was someone John cared about deeply but lost. John is visibly angry, but the story of his past is slowly unraveling. At this point, Finch is trying to convince John to work with him, arguing that by joining forces, they can potentially save lives. Though hesitant at first, Harold takes John to his operational base, where John discovers that the list doesn't contain names, but rather social security numbers of people who may be involved in upcoming crimes. John dives into his new task, quickly narrowing down Hanson's potential enemies to 2 individuals.
The first is Wheeler, her co-counselor.
Her co-counselor who used to date Hanson, but she broke up with him. The other one could be a gangster named Pope, who was sent to jail by Hanson. As JN continues to follow her, he attends Pope's trial where Detective Fusco is giving his statement. But after the trial, Hanson scolds Fusco because he went off script without her knowledge. Later, Hanson visits Pope in prison to inform him that she feels he is not responsible for the crime. John hears on the microphone implanted in her phone that Pope has a younger brother named Michael, whom he is trying to protect. It is hinted that Pope is lying about the murder he reportedly committed to shield his brother from the real murderers, because Michael witnessed them committing a murder. The following day, Wheeler enters Hansen's workplace to discover more about Mike by scanning her computer, so JN assumes that he is involved somehow. That night, the bad guys get to Michael first, but John intervenes and blasts their truck with a grenade launcher. Reese saves Michael and grabs badges from the bad guys, revealing that they are crooked cops. Ray starts checking over them and finds out that they are working with Fusco. Fusco puts innocent people in jail while the dirty cops kill people to keep them quiet. John is interested in learning more about Harold's list. That was created after the 911 attacks, and Harold was hired by the government to create a machine that compiles data from all of the nation's cameras and microphones. The machine creates two lists, one focused on potential terrorist attacks and the other on other types of crimes. Harold has constructed a backdoor for them to obtain this second list, but all they get are the social security numbers, leaving them to figure out what will happen on their own. Although John thinks Hansen is in danger, he keeps working. However, it seems that Hansen is collaborating with the dirty cops who assassinated Pope last night in his cell. Hansen orders the dirty cops to kill Wheeler as well because Wheeler digs too much. As Fusco emerges from behind John and aims a gun at him, John flees from Fusco's custody while he is taking him to the desert with the intention of killing him. And he returns to New York. The dirty cops are going to kill Wheeler while they frame a criminal, but Reese stops them in time. He then takes care of Hansen by manipulating some recordings, and at the end, he blackmails Fusco into working for him because he will eventually need an insider. A few days later, John walks into an elevator and strikes up a conversation with a man named Bill. He asks the man if the flowers he is holding are for his wife, but Reese already knows the answer. He begins by stating that some women leave their partners when they find out they are cheating, but other women hire two men to make it appear like a robbery gone wrong. Reese then picks up the two men who are following Bill and advises him to get a reputable divorce attorney. The following day, the machine has a fresh number for Harold and John to work on. This time, the number belongs to a girl named Teresa, but her situation is a little unique. Harold brings John to the cemetery and informs him that Teresa is meant to be there. Her father was a real estate developer, but the market crashed and he went bankrupt, which drove him insane, and he slaughtered his family on a weekend trip before shooting himself. Harold states that the system sees everything, so if her number appears, it signifies that the girl is alive. Reese meets Fusco to ask for this case's file from the police, and Fusco has no choice but to comply after reading the file. John informs Finch that this was a professional hit, and the hitman made it appear as if the father had done it. Harold wonders how Reese knows it, and the latter says that this is the way he would do it shortly. Finch uses his technology to find the girl, and John goes after her. Teresa realizes she is being followed and manages to flee before John can get a hold of her. John sees Harold in an office where he appears to be working, and it is revealed that Harold owns the company and only works there to hide in plain sight. JN also gives Harold a little device that Teresa left behind. This device records card information when people use their credit cards and ATMs. Teresa apparently makes a living by stealing card information and then withdrawing money. Reese asks around the streets to learn about the killer who got the contract for Teresa's family and learns that a guy nicknamed Solnick did it. The hitman is currently in jail because he was arrested for another case. John meets him and asks him why he did not kill the girl. Snack responds that he has a code and would never kill a child. He only informed the girl that if she told anybody about him, he would come for her to finish the job. Reese wants to know who hired him, but Solnick claims that he only met the man who hired him once and was paid in cash. No names were exchanged. Teresa soon tries to sell some financial information online, and Finch is able to track her down. Reese finds her, but he intercepted by an assassin who was seeking the girl. Sean saves the girl and brings her to a hotel, where she tells that her father blamed her Uncle Derek for what happened to him. John finds Derek and discovers that he worked with two big contractors to kill his brother because his land would be inherited by him. They did it because that piece of land is now worth 40 times its old value, but they are now looking to kill Teresa because they know that she will inherit her father's land if some legal entity. When John finds one of these large contractors and runs a large truck over his car, Reese asks the man to stop the head on Teresa, but he responds that it is already happening. Back at the hotel, where the assassin is looking for Teresa and Harold is attempting to get the girl outside using the fire escape. When the assassin discovers them and points his gun at them, John shows up just in time to kill the assassin. A day later, John phones Agent Carter to tell her it's time for them to meet. Carter brings some secret officers with her, but all she finds is Teresa. She escorts the girl to the police station to reunite her with her aunt. Carter attempts to get more details from her, but the girl insists her traumatic experience has left her with memory gaps, making it hard to recall much about the man who helped her. Reese eventually drops by Harold's office again, only to find out Harold has relocated. When John calls, Harold reminds him of his need for privacy and asks Reese not to contact him. Harold will be the one to reach out when necessary. There's little time for them to rest, though, as the machine quickly provides a new number. Finch soon discovers the number belongs to a man named Joey, a former soldier decorated with numerous medals for his bravery. Reese begins keeping an eye on Joey, who now works as a hotel groom. Before long, Joey sends a cryptic message to a number and leaves his job abruptly. John follows Joey, and they both end up at a bank. Joey puts on a mask as his accomplices enter to carry out a robbery. John is forced to stay down, unable to intervene. When the guard reaches for his gun, John stops him, knowing it's a bad idea. After the heist, Harold suggests wrapping up the case and turning Joey over to the police before anyone gets hurt or worse. However, Reese is determined to find out how a decorated soldier like Joey got tangled up in armed robberies. He keeps an eye on Joey and soon discovers he's linked to a group of former soldiers who pull off heists. Reese gathers enough intel to build a cover story and approaches a former sergeant named Sam, who owns a bar. Reese tells Sam he's looking for a high-paying gig, claiming a supposedly deceased Marine friend pointed him in Sam's direction. A few days later, Finch orchestrates a situation where the team's driver gets arrested by the police, planting a shotgun to ensure the charges stick. This creates an opening for Reese to join the group, allowing him to have his first face-to-face meeting with Joey and the rest of the crew. Meanwhile, Carter is carefully reviewing the security footage from the bank robbery and catches sight of John's back. She notices how he subtly intervenes, preventing the security guard from drawing his gun and potentially escalating the situation. When John runs into Harold again, he insists that Joey doesn't seem like the type to take a life. John explains that while killing in war may be justifiable, it's entirely different to harm innocent people. He then feigns a casual encounter with Joey, casually inquiring about when their next job is. Joey responds that the timing depends on Sam, who's the one calling the shots for the crew. The two of them begin to bond a little more after they get into a scuffle with two bankers. Reese starts probing Joey about whether he has any kids, sensing that the soldier is linked to two different women. Joey prefers to keep his personal life under wraps, so he replies that he has some obligations he needs to handle. A few days later, the gang calls Reese for a new job while the police successfully uncover the identity of one of their members. The crew hits an underground gambling den owned by the mafia, making a swift exit just before law enforcement arrives on the scene. The heist goes smoothly, allowing them to escape without a hitch. Harold thinks it's time to shut this operation down, but John requests a little more time. He wants to protect Joey, having discovered that one of the women Joey frequently visits is his girlfriend, while the other is the wife of his friend from the war. Joey's friend has a young daughter, and Joey has taken it upon himself to collect money to ensure she has a secure future. His friend's wife has also recently had a baby, making Joey feel even more responsible for their well-being. John participates in the gang's next mission, which involves stealing case evidence related to someone named Elias. Finch soon uncovers that Sam is planning to betray the team and warns Reese when the group hands the case files over to Sam. He double-crosses them and kills the others, but Reese is able to save Joey, advising him to leave town immediately. Later, Sam hands the stolen case evidence to a mysterious figure, but by the time Reese tracks him down, Sam is already out of reach. After everything they've been through, Harold figures it's a good time to visit the doctor. Though he's dealing with some back pain and needs medication, his real reason for going is to swipe Dr. Tillman's hospital radio. Her number popped up from the machine, and now the team needs to figure out what's happening in her life. John starts tailing her and soon realizes that Dr. Tillman is quite a lonely person, spending most of her time buried in work without much of a personal life. However, one night, she decides to go out for a change. A man approaches her, trying to make a move and follow her, but Reese steps in and handles the situation. Inside the club, Reese spots a man named Andrew. Reese returns the favor, bumping into Andrew and discovers he's carrying drugs. Reese later learns from the bartender that Tillman comes to the club alone every night. The following day, John breaks into Andrew's apartment and hacks into his computer, stealing his files. When he and Harold go through the data, they discover that Andrew is a predator, always seeking ways to manipulate and exploit women. He also has a criminal history from his college days, but those records have since been officially erased. While Carter reviews footage of John's team infiltrating the headquarters to steal the case files, she notices one of the thieves exchanging brief words with Harold. This interaction catches her attention. Later that night, John observes as Andrew approaches Dr. Tillman at a bar. They share a quick, flirty exchange before leaving together. Andrew invites her back to his place, but Tillman declines. As Andrew walks away, John notices something odd. Tillman begins stalking him. Using a camera to zoom in on his movements, John calls Finch, revealing that it's not Andrew who's following Tillman, but rather the other way around. John then reaches out to Fusco for help in digging up Andrew's past. Upon reading his old file, John pieces together the story. Back in college, Andrew was accused of sexually assaulting a woman. The charges were dropped due to lack of evidence, but that woman later took her own life after a drug overdose, and she happened to be Dr. Tillman's sister. Now, Tillman is out for revenge, and the machine flagged her because she intends to kill Andrew. Meanwhile, Carter visits Harold, asking him about his interaction with the robber. Harold, of course, lies, saying the robber only told him not to stare. As John continues his investigation, he discovers that Tillman has purchased chemicals capable of dissolving Andrew's body after she kills him. John hatches a plan to stop her, arranging for Andrew to be caught in an accident involving his car, which John has secretly loaded with drugs. The police arrest Andrew, but he's released the next day. Frustrated, John wonders why it didn't work until Fusco explains that Andrew is too wealthy, with lawyers whose fees far exceed Fusco's annual salary. That night, Dr. Tillman sneaks into Andrew's apartment, tases him, and then drugs him before wheeling him out to her van. Just as she's about to make her move, John steps in and calmly asks her to sit down for a talk. Knowing exactly who she's got tied up in the back of the van, John convinces her not to kill Andrew, reminding her that if she does, the best part of who she is, someone who heals, will be lost forever. Tillman isn't a killer, but a doctor. John then takes Andrew to a secluded spot and engages in a deep conversation. He wrestles with whether Andrew should be spared because people can change, or if he should be eliminated because people never truly change. John reflects on whether there are genuinely good people left, or just difficult choices to make. He wonders what he'll regret more, letting Andrew live or taking his life. Finally, John asks Andrew to help him make the right decision. A few days later, the machine hands Finch a new social security number. This time, it belongs to a man named Samuel Gates, a respected judge at the Supreme Court, known for his tough stance on crime. It's not surprising that Gates may have made a few enemies along the way. John starts tailing him and quickly notices a group of men also watching the judge. One man seems ready to make his move, but instead of attacking, he pulls out a phone, sends a message, and tosses the phone in a dumpster. John grabs the phone and reads the message, which mentions Samuel's son leaving school. He realizes with a shock,
I think we've been following the wrong Sam Gates.
Just as some thugs attempt to kidnap the judge's son, John intervenes, fighting them off, but one of the men pulls a gun and shoots him. Reese collapses, unconscious, as the kidnappers take the judge's son. Soon after, the judge receives a distressing call the kidnappers have his child. They instruct him to await further contact and not to inform anyone. Devastated, the judge is paralyzed by fear, prompting John to approach him.
Who are you? I'm here to help you.
Someone who's here to help, John replies. He reassures the judge that as long as his son remains useful to the kidnappers, they'll keep him alive. While Samuel is desperate for answers about John's identity, John remains vague, focused only on offering his help. Together, they head to the judge's home, where the judge wonders how the kidnappers bypassed his alarm system. John advises him to wait for the next call while he investigates the nanny's home. Meanwhile, John stays in contact with Finch, who is attempting to hack the phone company to trace the kidnapper's call. At this point, Finch can't quite manage the trace, and John discovers that the nanny has been murdered. John continues his search and, with Finch's help, locates one of the suspects. After roughing him up, John notices a tattoo on the unconscious man's chest, identifying him as a member of the Eastern European gang, SP9, which has apparently set up operations in New York. That night, the kidnappers contact the judge again. This time, they don't demand money, they want him to drop the case against a woman named Angela. If he lets her off, they'll return his son. The judge reveals that Angela's case is a simple hit and run. Finch, on the other hand, uncovers that SP9 has expanded its operations to at least 18 countries. The next day, the judge presides over Angela's trial. He subtly aids her defense but drags out the ruling, trying to buy time. The gang's leader calls again, demanding the judge stop stalling. But the judge insists he has to do things properly. Meanwhile, Reese interrogates the man he captured earlier and extracts the location where the guy usually collects his payment. Reese heads there, discovering $500,000 after roughing up the two guards watching over the money. At the same time, Finch listens in on Angela's phone call with the gang boss and pieces things together. Angela works at a bank developing software to detect money laundering, but with a simple click on her computer, she can deactivate it, giving the criminals free rein. The next day, Finch poses as a bank employee and manages to steal some data from the servers. Meanwhile, the trial drags on, and John searches for Samuel's son, but the boy isn't where John expected him to be. Without any leads on the boy, the judge is left with no choice but to dismiss all charges against Angela, not guilty on all counts. Afterward, the gang boss contacts Samuel, instructing him to retrieve his son, though John realizes their true intention is to kill the judge. When Samuel arrives at the designated spot, the gang forces him to say his final goodbyes to his son, but just in time. Reese shows up with Angela and reveals all the intel he's gathered. Angela admits she disables the algorithm at the bank for 3 minutes each morning, allowing the SP9 to carry out their transactions. This is how she's connected to the bank. The gang boss, sensing the operation has been compromised, orders his men to eliminate everyone. A shootout breaks out, with the bad guys ultimately being defeated. Finch hands over evidence to a lawyer, ensuring Angela will be sent to prison, while the police find her and the gang members tied up.
NYPD, anybody home?
Next, John has to play the role of a driver to connect with their latest target identified by the machine. He meets a woman named Zoe Morgan, pretending to be her new chauffeur. Zoe, ever cautious, calls to confirm the switch, but Finch intercepts and reassures her. John drives her to a location where she discreetly buys a gun. Later, back at her apartment, Finch discovers yet another gun, and John notes that buying a second one must mean she needs it to be untraceable. As Zoe changes, John takes her to an event, suspecting she might be their perpetrator. At the event, Zoe meets with a high-ranking officer and returns his gun, revealing that it had been misplaced, and she retrieved it to help him avoid trouble. Afterward, John drives her home, and she instructs him to pick her up again the next day. Be here tomorrow at 10 sharp. Finch then asks John for his thoughts, and John explains that Zoe is a fixer, someone who gets paid to do favors. In her line of work, there are undoubtedly many people who would want her dead. Meanwhile, the police uncover the body of a man who had once been the prime suspect in an old case involving a woman named Marlene Elias. The stolen case file from earlier episodes turns out to have belonged to Marlene Elias, and Carter connects with the detective who had previously worked on it. He reveals more details. Marlene had been a waitress at a mafia-owned cocktail bar, where she had an affair with the Don. She pushed him to divorce his wife, but when the Don got tired of her, he hired a hitman to kill her. The case was bought off by the Don, allowing the killer to walk free. Marlene and the Don had a son, who could be the one responsible for stealing the file and killing the prime suspect in his mother's murder. Meanwhile, Zoe finds herself in danger due to a man named Mark Lawson, heir to a massive pharmaceutical company. He had previously hired her to recover a recording of his illegal affair. After killing the reporter who had the tape, Mark now plans to eliminate Zoe to cover all loose ends. John steps in just in time to save her. Finch poses as a major shareholder in the company, seeking to confront Mark. As Finch digs deeper, he uncovers that Mark's affair was only part of the story. The woman Mark killed was also on the verge of exposing a major scandal involving one of the company's drugs. This drug had a shocking 3% mortality rate. 6 out of 200 people had died during trials. It seems that Mark and his company had bribed officials to fast-track the drug's approval. John and Zoe break into the pharmaceuticals headquarters to retrieve deleted files, but they are soon caught. Tied up and facing death, Mark prepares to kill them. However, Zoe bluffs, claiming she's already sent the incriminating report to someone she trusts.
Hope you don't mind. I emailed a copy to a friend.
Mark negotiates, and Zoe agrees to lead him to the person holding the report, but only if he promises to let her live. Before they leave, Zoe subtly slips a paperclip to John. He uses it to free himself, taking out the guard before rushing to rescue Zoe. In the end, the team leaks the damaging information, leading to the pharmaceuticals' downfall, and justice is served. As they part, John advises Zoe to stay out of trouble,
Stay out of trouble.
to which she responds, "That's not really an option for me."